back here on 757 Saturday Sports Talk. Like, share, and subscribe to our Cova Sports TV page on YouTube, also on Apple, Spotify, Virginia Preps, as well as Instagram, X, all those good platforms, Facebook too, LinkedIn. And we have a special guest with us. You can check out his work with Irish Breakdown. He does fabulous content and work for them on Notre Dame football, recruiting, and so much more. We say hello to our pal Bryan Driskell. Bryan, I guess we can say Happy New Year. It's 11 days into 2025. Yeah. It hasn't expired yet as far as saying that. Maybe not. I don't know. But how's life treating you?
Well, hey, you know what? Notre Dame has won 2 college football playoff games in 2025. So it is a very happy new year indeed. There's no question about that.
Yeah, Ed is excited about that as he has
the
jersey on. He's so thrilled beyond belief. And listen, I will say this to you: as we're watching the game, he from his home, me from mine. He says to me, this thing is done. We're losing the game." And the next thing you know, the Irish get that Jaden Greathouse 54-yard game-tying touchdown, and he's back in it. And he even thought the kicker was going to hook it at the end. I actually kind of thought he might as well because it tends to go that way sometimes with Mitch Jeter with the 41-yard field goal. And all your years of watching Notre Dame football, covering him, Bryan, where does this one that they just had rank in terms of exciting finishes? And certainly the magnitude's got to put it, if not at the top of the list, among the best games in the last 20-plus years, correct?
I mean, it's the biggest game Notre Dame has won since 1993 when they beat number 1 Florida State. I mean, it's when you think of the type of game they had to win. I mean, it's different than how Florida State won in 1993 because in 93, Notre Dame, led that game. They were up 24-7 at one point in time. But when you think of the finish, you've got to make a big stop on defense to win the game. They did that in 1993. You think of the magnitude of the game. That puts you one game away from playing for a national championship. If they beat BC the next week, they're playing for a national championship. And this is a program that hadn't won a New Year's Six game since January 1st of 1994, just a little month after that Florida State game. And they've won 2 in the last week. And this one gives them a chance to play for a championship, something that we haven't seen Notre Dame really do in any kind of playoff era. Obviously, in 2012, they had a chance to play for a national championship, but that was a different system and a different era and a very different team. And so, look, there's been some big wins in the last 30 years, but there's been none bigger than this win against Penn State. Not necessarily because Penn State's the best team that they've beaten in the last 30 years, although they're very, very good. But when you think about the magnitude of the game, the stakes that were involved, and look, I'm with you, Coach. They're down 10-0, and you're thinking it's, the magic is ended, right? It's just there are too many injuries. They're just too worn out. This just isn't the same team we've seen. And the last drive of the second quarter, I think, gave them a little bit of a spark, but they came out the second half, and you saw a completely different football team. And, look, a lot of people that don't coach or haven't played the game like the poo-poo halftime adjustments. I think everybody that's ever coached or played the game understands that those can be the difference between two really well-coached football teams. Notre Dame made some big-time halftime adjustments, but at the end of the day, what it was really about is the players came out and they were fired up. They executed at a high level. And the more talented team and the better team finally started playing like it. And that's what we saw in that game, in my opinion.
Ed?
Well, I agree, Bryan. Thanks for coming on again. When Matt told me he got a hold of you, I said, good, we got to talk Notre Dame because you just went through the history. It's been a while since we've really been able to talk about Notre Dame at this level. Every year it seems like, okay, they start around number 11, 10, right around in there. People talk about it. Tradition is strong. And then they lose the game and everybody says, I told you, this ain't back in the 60s, 50s. Notre Dame is nothing and all that. But this year we've held form, so to speak. And I'm also a little prejudiced that I think that national media really likes it when Notre Dame falters. They have the least amount of room of any team in the top 25 yearly to make mistakes and lose. I think this year when they lost to Northern Illinois, a lot of people wanted to drop them out of the top 25, but they were too good to drop them all the way out because they were up there around number 8 or 9. But boy, people just wanted to figure, well, they're going to lose again later. We'll get rid of them. But here they are. And the Penn State, and I watched every play against Penn State, which is my second best team, by the way, grown up in the Happy Valley area. I was worried because Penn State, even though they don't get a lot of credit either, they Franklin lose all the big games. They're a solid team. They're a solid type of team that could give Notre Dame a problem if you allow Penn State to do what they normally do. Then they play that ball control offense that you're going to have trouble getting at. And that's why I said to Matt, 10-0, they were just playing so flat. A couple injuries. I said, they can't keep Carter away from the backfield. He's in the backfield more than running. But they came out there. I like to think, even though they had injuries, a key part of that was the line, because Carter was not as effective second half. Your observation of line play, first half, second half.
Well, they made some adjustments in the second half. One thing that they did with the run game is they put more tight ends on backside away from runs, which what they were doing in the first half is they were crashing that backside edge a lot. So that was one of the adjustments they did. They ran a lot more counter in the second half. And the other thing they did, Coach, which is interesting, is Penn State was bringing a lot of extra pressures off of the edge, not just Abdul Carter, but they were bringing their nickel on fires. They were bringing their safety down. So Notre Dame started running the quarterback counter. And what quarterback counter did is that allowed the offensive line to kind of get more of a push. It kept one offensive lineman now still engaged instead of two linemen pulling on counter. And then what they did was they used their running back, Jeremiah Lovin and Aeneas Williams, as a lead blocker. So that'll help them to secure an extra edge and an extra gap, I should say, in the line, which I think factored in as well. But the other thing, too, is as much as the great adjustments helped, Charles Jagusah was just a different kind of player when he went in for Rocco Spindler. Rocco is such a great kid and a warrior, but he's also a kid playing on one leg, and he just could get no push off that right leg. He could get no drive. You could just tell he was very hampered by that injury. Jagusah comes in. He hasn't played all year. He's fresh. He was going to be a starter before his injury, and he played really well. I mean, he was getting a lot of movement on the line, and I think as they started getting more confidence in that third quarter, they started coming off the line. They started playing hard. And by running more pin and pull, by running more counter type of stuff, gap type schemes instead of their zones type stuff, it allowed them to kind of take that aggressiveness, wash it down. And then now that you can kind of let the running back be your lead blocker on some of those quarterback counters, that let them get an extra hat in the run game. And that was a big factor for in a game where, like you said, Coach, first half, I mean, Abdul Carter was killing him, but he wasn't the only one. I mean, Zane Durant had a great first half as well. And Notre Dame made their adjustments. And I think the size of Notre Dame started to kind of wear on Penn State a little bit in the second half too. Penn State's not a real big defensive line. And in a lot of ways, Notre Dame and Penn State are constructed very similarly.
Yes.
And, size-wise, they're both more about athleticism than they are size. They're both different from Georgia. And I think Notre Dame started to lean on them a little bit. And I think that factored in as well. But look, Coach, sometimes, game plan can be okay, but you're not executing, right? I mean, you coach basketball. I'm sure there's sets you drew up. Hey, this stuff works. We're just not executing it. You get it at halftime. You clean it up. You get them on track. And then you run those sets, and they start working because they were there. You just needed to clean up the execution. And there was some of that from Notre Dame too. And that's where you give the players a lot of credit. They just came out in the second half. They played harder. They were just played with a little bit more urgency from a tempo standpoint, and the execution got better. And combine that with some adjustments, you saw Notre Dame absolutely rip Penn State up. Guys, they had scored 24 points and had 261 yards of offense against Penn State in the second half. That's a lot against that defense. And that's a really good defense. And Penn State just didn't have any answers outside of one big Riley Leonard mistake, which is what really let Penn State. If it's not for that interception in the second half, I think Notre Dame might have kind of started to run away with that one a little bit. That allowed Penn State to kind of get back in it, and then it was a battle, until the very end.
Well, and remember, Penn State had won 21 straight games when leading at the half, had 141 yards rushing and a touchdown second half. Not the case for that running game, led by a couple of guys in Nick Singleton and Katron Allen from our backyard in Norfolk there at Northview High School. One of the comments said, give Marcus Freeman his flowers. I want to ask you, and I'm sure Ed will chime in on this with you too, as we get ready to turn the page to the matchup coming up with Ohio State as the Buckeyes held off Texas. A couple of memorable plays from their defense at the end with Jack Sawyer and, of course, Caleb Downs with the INT. You have maybe the two best safeties in the sport going at this one with Watts for Notre Dame and Downs for Ohio State. But Marcus Freeman, someone posed to me yesterday, Brian, I will to you. I mean, Nick Saban's gone now. You don't have Urban Meyer in the sport. Brian Kelly's been long gone from Notre Dame and hasn't had the success at LSU. Dabo Swinney's not been as successful at Clemson lately. If you're starting a college football, pick your coach tree. I wouldn't have never thought this to start the year, and certainly after the Northern Illinois game, despite that win over Texas A&M. Is Marcus Freeman, if not one, is he in the top 2 or 3 of coaches you're picking with what he's done here in a short amount of time at Notre Dame?
I mean, I think he's in the conversation, right? Like, I don't want to get ahead of myself a little bit. I mean, you don't come to Notre Dame and get evaluated on almost winning championships. You come to Notre Dame and get evaluated on, did you win a championship? And so there's still work to be done, right? So I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. But I think when you look at what has allowed Marcus Freeman to be successful, He's a genuine guy. What you see is what you get. The nice guy, the friendly guy you see in interviews is who Marcus Freeman is when he's not in the middle of coaching. But he also on the field is a former Big Ten middle linebacker, and you see that intensity when he's coaching. And I think the genuineness is, resounds well with his players. Even things like telling his quarterbacks, "Hey, we're going to the portal 2 years ago, and we'd love to have you, but you got to make whatever decision that's best for you." I think there's something to that. We're in an era where coaching is such I'm going to tell you what you need to hear, what I think you need to hear, not necessarily what is the truth. There's something refreshing about that. And this is a coach who shows that, hey, look, I'm going to push you, I'm going to challenge you, and I'm doing it because I love you, and I'm doing it because I want what's best for you. And the players, they respond to that. And young people, even those that don't think they want to be challenged, most young people want to be pushed. They want to be told, you're capable of greatness, and I'm going to push you to that, and I'm going to hold you accountable to that. And I think there's a lot to that. And here's the other thing, too. At the end of the day, all those things are great. But what has allowed Marcus Freeman to be successful on top of his own talent is he has done a phenomenal job the last 2 years at hiring people around him that are also at the top of their game. I mean, you could argue that Notre Dame has 2 coaches, maybe 3, that are the best in the business at what they do. I mean, I think it's not overly debatable that Mike Mickens is the best secondary coach in football. I think I would argue with anybody that wants to disagree with me that Dylan McCullough is the best running backs coach in college football. And right now, I don't know that there's a better defensive coordinator in the game than Al Golden. And then you throw in, Mike Denbrock was a Bros Award finalist last year, and Al Washington has done a really good job with the defensive line. Max Bull is an up and coming coach, and you start to say, like, boy, this is a really good coaching staff. And that's one of the things that sets great coaches apart is, I got to do my thing as a head coach, but I got to surround myself with great people. And Marcus Freeman has certainly done that. And that's another thing that factors into why I think right now he needs to be considered one of the top coaches. But if I'm going to start putting him in that top 2 or 3, he needs one more.
Yeah, certainly getting the big wins over Kirby Smart of Georgia, Ed and James Franklin and Penn State these last 2 rounds. The ladders, he's climbing the ladder here in a short amount of time.
Kirby still got those 2 rings, though, right? I mean, he got the head-to-head, but Kirby still got those 2 rings. And if Ryan Day, if Ohio State wins, now Ryan Day's he's 3-0 against Notre Dame, and he's got a national championship. So that's 2 coaches that I think are ahead of you. But Dabo still got those 2 rings. And Dabo beat Notre Dame the last time they played. So I think this game is needed. I mean, Marcus Freeman has just entrenched himself to me as a top 5 to 6 coach. There's no doubt about that. Mm-hmm. There's no question about that for what he's done in the last 2 years. But to kind of get into that echelon of I'm on the same level as guys who've won championships, you kind of need to win a championship, in my opinion.
No, it's fair.
That's especially at Notre Dame. Like it'd be different if we were talking about like a different program where you're having a season like the program has never had. Like, let's just say somehow like Kenny Dillingham upsets Texas last week and they're playing in the semifinal. You're like, oh, you know what? This is the best I've ever seen. This guy is. But at Notre Dame, it's a little different animal. I know it's been a while, but the standard is still the standard, right? And the standard is still championships. And that's what Marcus Freeman wanted when he came here. It's a big reason why he wanted this job, because he wants that standard. He wants to challenge himself to that standard, and he wants to be able to challenge his players and his team to that standard.
That's a fair way of looking at it, as the Irish are a 9.5-point pup against these Buckeyes coming up in the national championship.
Well, real quick before we get back to that game, Brian, an interesting point. Being a coach myself, when they hired Freeman, I was skeptical. I just put it out there. I said, he's the best we can get right now, but being a coach, let me shut my mouth. Let's give him a shot. And even right now, I agree 1,000,000% with you. Let's not go crazy and give him, the world. He's got his team there. But one thing he does, he deflects a lot of attention outward, except the negativity. And an interesting way to look at this would be, I don't know if you've seen it, Mick Cronin, UCLA basketball coach this week, and Freeman, when they interviewed Freeman up there on the stage after the game, how he just said, I got a bunch of savages. These kids really go hard. They dig. And there's probably times in that locker room where that words weren't coming out, but he made sure it was in the locker room. Mick Cronin, Jesus, what else you want? I'm the best guy here in practice. I've won 500 games. What am I supposed to do? These kids are soft. Come on, man. You can't throw them all on. Even your assistant coaches, you can't throw them all under the bus.
He got tossed last night at Maryland. He got out of there.
Right. But he did two very distinct ways of coaching. I know why Mick Cronin said it. I've done a little bit of that in my career.
No,
and then get in the locker room and tell those kids, look, what I said out there was wrong. but it's not wrong. I'm tired of this. It just spilled over. And you apologize. You got to apologize to your kids because you got to get them back in because they'll quit on you. Today's world, they'll be in a portal tomorrow. But what Freeman does, I think, is he dictates to his assistants because you said it. He knows who he has. Do your job. Here's the game plan. Here's the program. Now run it. And they do. They do it. And he gets on the kids that need to get on. There's going to be kids you got to kick in the butt, and there's kids you got to wrap your arms around to get the max out of both. You can't treat every kid the exact same way. You can't. People say you treat players equally. No, you don't. I mean, parents don't treat their kids equally. You try to treat them fairly. There's that one kid that drives. This is probably like you, Brian. The one kid that drives a parent nuts because he always goes left when he's supposed to be going right, and the other kid's always going right. And you want to kind of give them more, but you got to be careful with that to bring it all together. Yeah. If Freeman wins this title, yeah, you could start talking about him. But even then, it's as they say, you got to look at the work, his total work as to what he's going to do. He's 39 years old, just turned 39, 40. Yep. Still young, which I think is a key too. He's young. He's closer to his players than a Dabo and Saban and those guys at the age. And sometimes that makes a difference. That's why in my later stages of coaching high school, and I keep saying I ain't done yet, I try to hire younger assistants to bridge that gap. So when the kids look at me like, what the heck is this old man talking about? The assistants can still dictate as to what needs to be done. I think that's extremely important, especially for today's type of kids, because they will turn you off in a heartbeat. Back in the day, we could be challenged and go at it hard to shut the coach up. Today, it's parents and kids saying, "Got by, I'm going to the portal," especially with the money situation. But I think that's something to look at in terms of what Freeman is really doing.
Well, first, I love what you said, Coach, because when I was at CNU, I had two receivers that were very different personalities, and one of them, when I'd yell at him, his head would go down, So I was like, okay, I got to coach him differently. Now I still demand just as much from him. I'd still get on him, but I'd have to get on him where it's me and him, and only he can hear me. I had another player who was a drill sergeant. His dad was literally a drill sergeant, and he only responded to really more of the to him, just that's how you talk normally is yelling. You had to really be clear that I am not happy right now. And so when their careers were over and one of them was looking to get into coaching, he said, "Hey, why did you treat me this way and the guy this way?" He said, "Shouldn't you treat all players the same?" I said, "No, you treat all your players fairly. You don't treat all your players the same because everybody learns in a different way. Everybody takes criticism in a different way and coaching in a different way." So I love that. But the interesting thing that you hit on, Coach, was Marcus Freeman is young, so he can relate to his players naturally because they are similar in age, where if I'm 60, I can kind of okay, I can pretend that I like your music, but I don't. I'm still listening to 90s rap before you were even born. But what Freeman was able to do, which I think has actually given him an advantage, is because he is young and has the relatability, he could then go hire veteran coordinators to that like Mike Denbrock, who's 60, and Al Golden, who's almost 60, who have been there, because he can bring sort of the relatability. He can deal with the cultural things. He can build the culture of the program. And now he's got these veterans that are really good at what they do. And I think that has helped him a ton because, like you said, if he was an older guy, then you now have to go get younger coordinators maybe to kind of help with that. And he was able to go get veterans. But I also think it speaks volumes about him to go hire a guy like Al Golden, who's been a successful head coach, who's been at Miami, who's been in the NFL. There was with Marcus Freeman, there's no insecurity about, well, gee, what if he does a good job? Maybe people like him more, whatever, which the previous head coach had a lot of that. If you started having success as a coach, he'd start kind of undermining you. Marcus Freeman doesn't have any of that because he has a set saying that he says, look, team glory brings individual glory, right? But it's all about the team. I mean, when you look at the answer he gave when they keep asking him about, you're the first black coach to do this, 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 and this. And he's like, guys, this isn't about me. This is about us. But that's who he is. It's not just a saying. Because, Coach, you can have all the sayings you want publicly, but if that's not what you're preaching every single day in the locker room or in the team meetings, then it's not going to resonate. But that stuff gets preached every single day. And when things don't go well, Marcus Freeman's I. That's how Freeman is. When things are unsuccessful, when they lose Northern Illinois, it's I. When there's success, it's we, it's them, it's us, and the players, I think, respect that, and it resonates with them. But also, Coach, as you know, at the end of the day, you can have all the sayings you want, you can do that. But if what you're saying isn't being played out when they go out and play, then they're going to stop listening to you. And what has worked for Marcus Freeman is as the players have bought into what he wants, it's worked. And then there's more and more and more buy-in, and that's what's made this team good. But let's not kid ourselves, guys. This is not a team of a bunch of try-hard guys that are out there winning because they just got a bunch of great, borderline walk-ons who are out there trying hard. This is a really talented football team as well. And at the end of the day, Coach, talent acquisition is still either 1A or 1B if you want to be a championship caliber football coach. And Marcus Freeman through the high school level and then through the portal has been phenomenal at talent acquisition.
Now it brings me to my next point. What are we going to do against these wide receivers for Ohio State if Howard is on? Their line play has been extremely good. They seem to be on a mission. They kind of went through some syrupy steps against Texas, but they did what they had to do at the right time. I'm looking at those, if they're getting the balls to the receivers, especially that youngster out there, Smith, we in trouble. What do you see as has to really now happen? Anything a little different? Of course, at this stage of the year, it's not a whole lot of different, but how do you see it?
Well, I think it's what you said. Don't let Howard be on. I mean, that's a big thing. But, what I love about this matchup is Notre Dame and Ohio State have played each other. They're very familiar with what they have talent-wise. And Notre Dame has a secondary that just held Penn State's receivers to 0 catches in the semifinal game. I mean, this is a really good cornerback room. But I do think they're going to have to somewhat adjust what they do, Coach. But I don't know how much you want to go away from what got you here. I mean, I'm a big believer that you go to battle in that last game with what got you there. You don't go away from your strength. So I think we'll still see a lot of man from Notre Dame. But I won't be shocked if we see a little bit of, hey, we're going to kind of bracket this guy a little bit with our safeties and then trust other guys to play man. But you put too much emphasis on stopping Jeremiah Smith, and all of a sudden you're leaving your slot, your nickel one-on-one with Mecca Buka. That could be a problem. And that's what makes Ohio State so dangerous is you could completely shut Jeremiah Smith down, and you still got to deal with the Mecca Buka. You still got to deal with Cardinal Tate. So at the end of the day, what's the best weapon against that? Dominate the run game, put them in a lot of passing situations, and get Will Howard on his heels, just like they did Drew Aller. He's getting a lot of flack for how he played, but I'm like, guys, let's go back and look at since Al Golden got here. There's a lot of really good quarterbacks that have had days just as bad, or in Caleb Williams' case last year, even worse against this Notre Dame defense. And at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to is you can't let Will Howard get comfortable. You can't let Will Howard go through his progressions and find his second and third read. You can't let Will Howard throw in rhythm. You can't let him, get in a position where he feels like he has an idea of what's in front of him and what you're doing. And if you do that, it's going to be what's successful for you. First half, Notre Dame didn't do a very good job of getting to Drew Aller. Second half, they did a much better job, and Penn State's offense had more struggles. So I think those are going to be the keys is you got to win up front. And I actually think Texas at times got good pressure on Ohio State. They certainly shut Ohio State's run game down. I mean, Ohio State, I think, rushed for like 81 yards in the game. I think they hit Howard, according to Pro Football Focus, had 5 hits on him in that game. And a lot of other plays where they just couldn't let him, even when he was throwing the ball, he was having to go to his first read and get it out, and they were catching him for 4-yard gains. I think that's still the recipe for success. If you can get to Will Howard, you have a shot to slow this offense down. If you can't get to Will Howard, it's going to look a lot like it did against Tennessee and Oregon.
Last one from me, and I'll let Ed finish up with you. I want you to also tell the fans how they can check out your work with Irish Breakdown, what you have on the social pages and online for folks that are big Notre Dame fans or college football fans. They could be a fan of Ohio State, whatever it is in the sport. X factor for you. I tend to think, Bryan, that this is going to be a close Ohio State win. Will not be surprised if Notre Dame wins the game. And I do think the matchup's going to be about how they defend those receivers, like you guys have touched on. Can they get a pass rush on them? Is there an X factor player either side, maybe a special teams guy, line? Where would you kind of circle 1 or 2 in this matchup as you kind of dive in on it?
I mean, this is a lines game, Matt. This is a lines game. I mean, you pick any lineman to step up and have a big day. I mean, I would say Howard Cross is a guy you want to see step up and have a big game. He hasn't really had a lot of production in the playoff, but it doesn't matter who it is up front. It was Junior Tuilamaka against Georgia and RJ Oben against Georgia. It could be Bryce Young. It could be one of those guys. It could be Josh Burnham, who had a huge play against Penn State on that second and goal from the 1-yard line. Stopping him at the 3, that 2-yard loss was huge because that ended up forcing a field goal. it's going to have to be up front. And on the other side of the ball, you've got it is what we saw against Penn State in the second half. You need your pass catchers to step up. If Notre Dame's pass game gets going, they're hard to beat. And they're really hard to beat. And we saw that against Penn State. So that's just going to be it. Trench play, and then on offense, whether it's Mitchell Evans, Jaden Greathouse, or ideally, like we saw in the semifinal game, both of them step up and have big games. That's going to be the key, because Ohio State's going to have the same game plan that everybody else has had. Shut down 4 and 24 in the run game. Do that, and there's the thought that you can stop Notre Dame's offense. First half, they did that, and they stopped Notre Dame's offense. But the pass game, Mitchell Evans and Jaden Greathouse and Jordan Faison really stepped up in the second half, and that's what gave Penn State problems. They just couldn't cover Notre Dame's receivers, and they're going to need to do that again. So that's where I'm kind of looking for some of those X factors. Somebody on the D-line's got to step up and make big plays, get to the quarterback, force turnovers, pressure the quarterback, those type of things. Don't ask your secondary to cover for 3-4 seconds against this team. And then on offense, you're going to need your playmakers to step up and make plays. I mean, at the end of the day, I have an expression, guys, that I think fits this is, at this level to win, your dudes got to be dudes, right? I mean, that's what it comes down to. Your dudes got to be dudes. And so Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price, Riley Leonard, Mitchell Evans on offense, those guys, they got to step up and show why, they're the dudes for this team. And the same thing is true on the other side of the ball.
Should be a fun one coming up a week from Monday in Atlanta. Again, Bryan Driskell, Irish Breakdown. I'll let Ed finish up with him. We'll play the fight song going out. How can they check out your work coming up as we lead into the game and then post-game? What can they see?
All of our written work is at irishbreakdown.com. And then whether your podcast app, whether you're on your YouTube channel, whatever you want to do, anything that you do to listen to shows, go to Irish Breakdown. Just type in Irish Breakdown, and you'll find our shows. We obviously have on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, however you listen to podcasts, type in Irish Breakdown, and you'll find it. And if you're listening via YouTube like you are right now, you can also, again, just type in Irish Breakdown. You'll see that IB logo. Looks a lot like this. Actually, it does look like this, except it's green, and you'll find us.
There you go. Ed, you got the Fighting Irish coming up on that week from Monday night. It's what you dreamed of. If you win, you and Bryan can have a party and a parade, and we'll get you back on and celebrate it, huh?
Man, I tell you, we got to get Bryan. Yeah, we got to get Bryan back on after we win a national title. I'm going in with trepidation, Bryan. I'm going to go like most of the general public. Ohio State predicted to win. I'll go with them winning, but I also do that because I'm normally wrong in predictions, so this will help Notre Dame win.
9.5's a lot, though. That's a lot of points. It's a lot of points.
Yeah, I definitely think they're covered, but I think that's going to come down by game time.
Do you guys know what team has the best record in college football this year against the spread?
I believe is it Notre Dame?
It's the University of Notre Dame, yes, sir.
I thought so, yeah. I think I saw something on that, yeah.
Well, I like this team, Coach. I do. I think that it's all about matchups, and I think they match up. They have areas where they match up well against Ohio State, like Texas did, right? And Ohio State's played really 4 good defenses this year. 3 of them kept them in the 20s or less. The only one they really torched was Tennessee, who just didn't want to be there that day. I mean, they just didn't want to be there. So I think Notre Dame does some things that match up pretty well. I've ridden them all year, and I'm not going to stop now. But look, I think I will say this. Here's the one thing I can say confidently, guys. If you look at the totality of the season, we're getting the 2 best teams in the championship game. If you look at the team, talking about, they're both top 10 offenses. They're both top 10 defenses. They both make big plays in special teams.
I agree.
These are the 2 best teams in college football. They both had one bad Saturday. Notre Dame's was in September. Michigan's or Ohio State's was in November. But outside of that, these are the 2 best teams in college football, and I think we're going to get a great game next Monday.
And I've posted this, Bryan. You may know the answer, may not, and we'll let you run here. I don't think it's ever happened in college football, pro football, college men's basketball that 2 teams lost as 20-plus point favorites at home to NIU and Michigan. But you know what? I think that's also the charm of these stories for both of them to get up off the mat. Obviously, it's an expanded playoff. It wouldn't have happened on the old format, but that's the neat thing about this matchup that the country's going to embrace and love coming up. And we got 9 days to build it up, is that you had 2 teams that were pretty much buried, left for dead, and here they are playing for a title.
Let's not also forget that the rise of the North continues in college football, guys. I'm serious. Like last year, you had Washington. Last year was Washington and Michigan. This year, it's Notre Dame and Ohio State.
They're gone.
And I love the expression that Shane Gillis said. Now that everybody can play players, all of a sudden the SEC is not as dominant. I don't think it's a surprise, if I'm going to be honest with you guys.
Yeah. Well, hey, Bryan, have a good one. Enjoy the weekend, and we'll talk with you probably after the championship game. Win or lose, we'll surely connect with you. And all the best. Thank you so much for coming on.
I always love coming on home, back home and being on the 757, guys. That's still where my family is. That's still where my heart is. So appreciate you guys having me on.
Thanks,
Our
Brian.
pleasure.
We appreciate
Bryan
you.
Driskell of Irish Breakdown. And that will do it for this edition of 757 Saturday Sports Talk. We all thank you for tuning in. As always,
Turn it up.
To Nova Sports TV on YouTube. And we'll talk to you next week. Brave the snow, whether you're in Virginia, Indiana, or wherever, because there's snow all over the country
I'm in
right now.
Miami, baby. I'm in Miami right now, Coach.
Well, you're not. You're loving the Miami.
You got it. You got it.
I got to go, Raven. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Ed. We'll do it again next week here on 757 Saturday Sports Talk. Have a great sports weekend, everyone. We'll talk to you next time.